The day my own daughter ordered me to serve my husband or get out of my house, I didn't raise my voice. I reached for my suitcase, smiled, and walked away from the home I had paid for with my sweat and the last bright years of my wife's life. The groceries were still sweating on my wrists when Brent barked his order from my leather chair. That chair had been Miriam's final gift before cancer folded her into silence, and seeing his stocking feet on the arm made something ancient and cold click into place behind my ribs. The television blared a game. He didn't glance up. "While you're up, Walt, grab me a cold one. Not the cheap stuff. The bottles I like." I could smell the lime he'd quartered on the coffee table, my table, the one I'd built on winter nights when Miriam still hummed in the kitchen. I set the bags on the entry rug so the milk wouldn't burst through the thin plastic and said, plain as a ledger, "I just came through the door." From the doorway to the kitchen, my daughter appeared with a dish towel crooking from one hand. Lila had Miriam's eyes, gray-green that could cut and soften in one blink, and I searched them for the girl who used to put dandelions in a jam jar on Miriam's nightstand. "Dad," she said in that stretched, tired tone grown children use on their clumsy elders, "it isn't a big deal. Just get Brent his beer." Brent finally looked at me. He was taller, thicker through the shoulders, 30 going on eternity, and he had learned that certain men can win most fights without ever throwing a punch if they are willing to stand too close, to tilt their faces down, to breathe on your patience. "You live here for free," he said. "You want to stay, you pitch in. That means when I ask, you do. It's respect." "This is my house," I answered. He stood up very slowly, enjoying the theater of it, and used his height like a handle to swing the room toward him. "Funny, because I see me and my wife doing the living and the paying and you lingering." Lila took 2 steps toward him, toward us, toward some imaginary center. "Dad, let's not start. Either you help out when Brent asks, or," and here she exhaled, like she had practiced in a mirror, "or you'll need to find somewhere else. I've been a banker, a father, a husband. I've said yes often enough to wear a groove in the word. Once, long ago, I picked apples with Miriam in the fall air until my hands cracked. Yes to staying late. Yes to the tuition bills that arrived like winter storms. Yes to an extra loan so Lila could have the dress with the silk buttons and the venue with string lights. Yes to down payment and the unending trickle of unexpected expenses. That afternoon, with my groceries pooling condensation on my rug, I found a different monosyllable. "Okay," I said. Brent smirked, victory loosening his mouth. "Good. So I'll pack." The smirk fell from him like something dropped off a shelf. Lila's mouth opened, closed. I walked down the hall past the photos of Lila at 7, 13, 17. There was her prom dress glimmering in a frame. I'd taken that picture, kneeling to catch Miriam's smile in the mirror behind her. There was Lila on the college quad beneath a crimson tree. I'd taken that picture, too, hands shaking from pride and the interest rate on the parent loan. My suitcase, navy, scuffed, thudded onto the bed. It still smelled faintly of sagebrush from our honeyed honeymoon in Wyoming. I packed as if measuring lumber, socks rolled, shirts folded sharp, medications into the zip pocket with the reading glasses Miriam used to steal. I wrapped the photo of her laughing on our back steps in 2 shirts. In the living room they were whispering, then muttering, then quiet again. The quiet of people who have discovered their leverage doesn't move the load. I wheeled the suitcase down the hall. Brent had reclaimed the chair. His posture had changed. Lila's arms were crossed like a barricade built of indecision. No one said goodbye. The Buick started on the first try, a faithful old friend, and I didn't look back at the house with the maple Miriam, and I planted the year Lila learned to ride a bike. The Pinecrest Lodge sits where Silverbrook starts to sputter into distance, a low run of doors and a flickering neon vacancy that has been on its last leg as long as I can remember. I'd passed it 1,000 times with Miriam, promising we'd stop in someday for pie at the diner next door. We never did. The clerk at the lodge asked if I wanted weekly rates. I said yes. He slid a key on a blue tag across the counter like he was dealing mercy. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. A bed. A chair. A round table that wobbled under the weight of memory. I set my suitcase open and my phone beside it. The screen was a field of little colored squares that added up to a life. Riverstone Bank, Laurel Mutual, Sunlight Auto Insurance. I made coffee in the room's little drip machine and stood by the window drinking it like medicine. Sunday morning at a small-town bank is quiet, but I'd worked 30-some years in lending. The automated lines have no Sabbath. I canceled the automatic mortgage payment for 1140 Sycamore that I had set up the day they bought the house, the day I brought my checkbook to the closing because Brent's parents couldn't make it. Reason for discontinuation? The bank voice asked. Beneficiaries no longer meet conditions, I said, and wrote down the confirmation number in the tidy hand that had approved and declined more dreams than I care to remember. Auto insurance next. 2 cars I never drove. One a truck with custom rims Brent had bought the week after I wrote a check for their new water heater. Effective date? Today. 3 credit cards where I'd added Lila as an authorized user during one of those late-night calls when she cried about gas prices removed. There will be no new charges permitted by the removed party, a woman read from a script. Outstanding balances remain the responsibility of the primary cardholder. Understood, I said, and felt something lighter inside me, like a hitch taken off a trailer. I paused over the beneficiary form for the life insurance. I had never imagined a day when I would not want my daughter to inherit the house and the accounts utterly. Then again, I had never imagined hearing my daughter tell me to obey another man in my own living room. I didn't click submit. Not yet. I wanted my anger cooled into wisdom before I wrote anything that couldn't be unwritten. On the screen, rows of numbers marched like patient soldiers. Tuition transfers 4 winters in a row, wedding checks, down payment, monthly mortgage drafts, utilities paid from my account when theirs ran dry. All the small, dull heroics of fatherhood. I logged out, set the laptop aside, and stared at Miriam's photograph. I'm all right, I told her. I'm finally all right. Calls started Monday. First, it was a polite message from Lila. Dad, I think there was a mistake with the mortgage. Then Brent, less polite. Old man, you put us in a bind. Fix it. As the week peeled away, the tone turned from puzzled to sharp to raw. By Friday evening, I counted 22 missed calls. I sat by the Pinecrest pool, an empty, blue rectangle shivering under a wind that smelled like snowmelt, and listened to the messages in order like a time-lapse of a storm. Dad, the bank says the payment didn't go through. Can you call me? Lila, Monday morning. Insurance says the policy's been changed. That's illegal. I'll sue. Brent, Monday afternoon. Daddy, please. We have bills due. This looks bad. Lila, Wednesday. Answer your phone. People are asking questions. Brent, voice low and dangerous, Thursday. Dad, I'm scared. Lila, Friday, very late, her voice hoarse. They said foreclosure notices start after 1 missed payment. I don't even know what that means. Please call me. Please. I turned my phone face down on the little round table, went to the diner, and ordered Miriam's favorite thing, meatloaf with extra gravy, because grief can become a ritual if you let it. Halfway through, a voice said my name like he'd just spotted a ghost in broad daylight. Walter Hale. I looked up into Bob Anders's tired smile. We'd shared coffee breaks at Riverstone Bank for a decade and a half. He'd moved to Main Branch before Miriam died, but he still had the banker's forward-leaning sympathy. He slid into the booth across from me without asking, the way old colleagues do when they smell a story. Haven't seen you since the service, he said gently. Heard you're staying out at the lodge. Everything all right? Family being family, I said. Bob gave a banker's nod, not prying, still reading. Funny thing, he said after the waitress poured coffee for him. Your son-in-law came in over the winter. January, I think. Wanted a home equity line on the Sycamore place. Bob's mouth twitched the way it does when a man tries to decide whether to laugh or spit. He had manufacturing on his side, papers that said he owned the place. We ran title. All you. Clean as daylight. When I told him, he got that look people get when a bluff's been called. It was as if someone had opened a basement door in my mind, and I could suddenly hear the boiler thumping. He tried to borrow against my house, I said, and felt the words place themselves on the table between us like evidence. Not tried, Bob corrected. Planned. The documents didn't fall out of the sky. He lowered his voice. Word around town, and you did not hear this from me, is he's deep into Glacier Crown Casino. Cards. He's one of those who thinks the river will turn because he wants it to. I paid for both meals, and Bob squeezed my shoulder when we stood. Be careful, he said. A man who will forge one kind of paper will sign another you'd never expect. I walked straight from the diner to the county courthouse. I have always believed in roads that go on the grid, petitions, signatures, receipts with the date in the corner. The clerk wore a knit cardigan and the expression of someone who has helped 100 people in worse pain than mine. Mr. Hale, are you sure? It lists your daughter as current occupant. It lists 2 adults who changed the locks on a man they told to leave his own home, I said calmly. 30 days notice. Serve it. Sheriff's office will handle service of process, she said, stamping the papers. The stamp thumped like a drum in my blood. From there I went to the police station. Detective Naomi Alvarez's desk had a coffee ring that overlapped a child's drawing of a dog. She'd served on the Rotary Committee with me when we raised money for the elementary playground. What brings you in, Walt? She asked, voice all listening. A few questions, a precaution, I said. And a favor. Do you know anything about Brent Turner and Glacier Crown Casino? Naomi's eyes shifted from kind to cop, which is to say they didn't move, but you felt the room get sharper. He's on first-name terms with the floor managers, she said. We've taken a couple of calls about disputes, not criminal, just noise. I'd place him at 15 to 20,000 in the hole, to a mix of legal lenders and men who prefer not to print contracts. I'd like to make a report, I said. He has escalated from demands to intimidation. I told her about the chair, the beer, the words. I told her about the phone calls and the time I saw his truck idle outside the lodge. I won't be baited, I added, but I won't be bullied either. Good, Naomi said, and when I slid my notebook across to show her confirmation numbers and dates, she smiled in a way only a detective and a banker would sincerely admire. This is the kind of paperwork that wins. Silverbrook is the kind of town where news travels like a rumor even when it's the truth. At the post office, Mrs. Pettigrew clucked her concern and asked careful questions that were questions only if you didn't know she volunteered everywhere and would carry whatever you told her to every porch with a stoop. At Miller's Hardware, 3 folks in aprons stopped to shake my hand when I leaned on the counter to buy a new lock for nothing in particular. You helped them? The owner asked, already knowing. For years, I said, not to boast, but to stop the mouths that might say I had not. At church, Pastor Grady nodded when I said it out loud. I chose to leave instead of obey orders in my own living room. He closed his eyes, and you could see in the lines of his face 50 other men and women who had tried to keep peace until the peace poisoned them. It didn't take Brent long to mount his counterattack. Men who live on bravado do not keep quiet when their audience wanders. One morning I saw him outside Riverstone Bank, talking loud enough to make birds pivot on their branch. He's slipping, he told anyone who paused. Dementia. It's sad. He threw us out. My wife is pregnant. Stress. Could he spread his hands, conjuring sympathy like a street magician? A half-circle of tired faces gathered, tellers on break, customers with deposit slips. My friend Tom from the dealership squinted at him the way you squint at a puzzle where the picture never quite resolves. I walked up and Brent's mouth tightened. Morning, Brent, I said softly. How's the poker treating you? He went still, eyes flicking over the audience as if to count witnesses before deciding on a strategy. What? 17 to 20,000, I said. Glacier Crown. Some to legal lenders, some to men without business cards. How's that going for you? He took one step closer, too close, the way a man does when he wants you to flinch. I didn't. You senile, he started. I raised one hand, palm out like stopping traffic. I can account for every dollar I spent to support you for 5 years, I said. Can you account for where your paychecks went? Around us, people made the sound of turning pages and opening eyes. Brent's face turned the color of a bad sunburn, and he shoved past me, saying something to no one about lawsuits. I went straight from that tableau to Naomi's office with a USB stick in my pocket. The night manager at Pinecrest, an old army sergeant with a thief's memory for faces, had gotten me footage of Brent loitering by my door, rolling a thread around in his mouth like a mint. Naomi watched the video twice, took my written timeline, and said, "Restraining order. We'll file it today." That afternoon, the order was signed. 500 feet. No contact. Sheriff's department served him at work, and within an hour my phone pinged with a number I didn't recognize and a message every bit as predictable as snow in February. "This isn't over." I forwarded it to Naomi and blocked the number. Then I sat on the edge of the motel bed and considered a thing I had avoided considering since Lila was born: my will. That night I typed the new language. The house on Sycamore, the house where Miriam had organized canned peaches with masking tape labels, where Lila had practiced piano and cried into a pillow through 2 freshman year breakups, that house would go, upon my death, to the Silverbrook Veterans Housing Trust. It would become 3 small apartments under one roof. The yard would hold a swing set. The garage would be converted into a workshop. I wrote it in formal language that made no room for second thoughts. I called my lawyer in the morning. He met me at the diner with a notary, and the 3 of us ate pie after I signed, because there are still rituals worthy of sugar. The next day, I called 3 of Brent's creditors. "I am not authorizing payment," I said to each. "I am correcting an address. Brent Turner does not live at 1140 Sycamore, has no claim to the property, and has been served with a restraining order." I didn't love the idea of debt collectors on my block. I loved the idea that men who lent to gamblers would stop mailing threats in my name. Lila called me late that night, voice small. "Dad, 2 men were at the house asking for Brent." I didn't know what to say. They knew his amount down to the dollar. "You tell them the truth," I said. "Tell everyone the truth." "Dad," she whispered. "I'm late. I think I might be pregnant." She said it like a child presenting a broken toy, like if she just looked sorry enough, the toy would mend itself. Love is not a toy, and truth is not a switch you flip. "Which doctor?" I asked. "Dad, privacy. Which doctor?" I repeated, and when she told me, I called, not to pry, but to put a card on file so no receptionist had to chase a young woman through her fear to get a copay. The nurse thanked me, voice steady, professional compassion wrapped in policy. "We can't confirm any details," she said, "but we can accept your kindness." Saturday, I ran into Brent's boss on Main. Tom from Silverbrook Motors looked like a man who'd had to tell too many teenagers their first dream car was not to be. "Walt," he said, "I always liked you, especially the way you helped my boy when he bought that little Chevy. Brent told people you'd lost it. This morning 3 folks told me he owes them money. One saw him at the casino the night he said he was at the hospital with Lila. I can't keep him on. I run a business people trust. Do what you need to do," I said. Truth doesn't need a PR team. And then came Sunday. St. Andrews has stained glass Miriam always said looked like hard candy. I sat in the 3rd pew on the left where we'd sat for 30 years, Miriam with her hands folded on her knees, me with mine wrapped around a bulletin. The sanctuary seemed fuller than usual. You could feel the thrum of a town gathered not only to sing, but to watch something happen that might stitch something back together or tear it clean. Pastor Grady preached on the prodigal son, and I felt the irony skim the back of my neck. When he opened the floor for testimony, Lila stood up from the back like a swimmer stepping into water she knows will be cold. She walked down the aisle without looking left or right. Her hands shook when she gripped the pulpit, but when she spoke, her voice found itself. "I need to tell the truth about my father," she said. "For 5 years, he paid for our life, mine and Brent's. He paid my tuition at an out-of-state college when I could have chosen a cheaper school. He paid for our wedding when Brent's family couldn't. He made the down payment and then paid the mortgage. When our cards were past due, he covered them. When our insurance lapsed, he added us to his policy. We let him do it. We expected it. 3 weeks ago, when he wouldn't do what my husband demanded, I told him to obey or leave. He left. No one coughed. Even the air seemed to hold still so we could hear her. My father had been our safety net so long we thought it was the ground," she continued. "And when he rolled it up and walked away, we called him cruel. But it was mercy. It made the truth visible. My husband is in debt, gambling debt. He lied about it. He lied to me. My father did not abandon me. I abandoned him to keep a peace that was really avoidance. She looked at me then, a small, stricken animal and a woman owning her voice both at once. Dad, I am sorry. I don't expect forgiveness today. I only promise to make the truth my habit, not my exception. Afterward, people pressed my hand, clapped my back, said phrases like, proud of you both and about time. Mrs. Pettigrew cried into a tissue and told me she had always suspected I'd been generous, but not this generous. I smiled and let the praise float by. Truth had done its own work. Lila waited until the last hug had finished and then approached slowly, like she would not force anything. The letter to the Silverbrook Tribune runs Wednesday, she said. I posted on Facebook. People know. She swallowed. Brent packed a bag yesterday and drove east with 2 buddies. No note. I filed for divorce. The nurse says, I'm not pregnant. I hugged my daughter, the way you hug someone who has finally stopped spinning. We start here, I said into her hair. With truth and coffee and no promises we can't keep. 3 months later, I stood on the lawn at Sycamore with a ribbon in my hand. The house looked like itself and not like itself, fresh paint, a ramp to the porch, 2 extra mailboxes sharing the old brass one that still said Hail. The Veterans Housing Trust had turned my house into 3 dwellings that smelled like new beginnings and Pine-Sol. A little boy ran across the yard with a paper airplane and crashed into my leg, then bounced away with the ease of the blessed. His mother shook my hand. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, she said. I don't know you, mister. Hail, but I will tell my children that a stranger made room for us. I'm not a stranger, I said. I'm a neighbor you hadn't met yet. The ribbon cut clean. People clapped, and across the street Mrs. Pettigrew dabbed her eyes again. I no longer slept at Pinecrest. I'd bought a small cabin on Blue Heron Lake with 2 bedrooms and a kitchen built for 1-person simplicity. Mornings, I drank coffee on the tiny deck and watched ospreys stitch the water. Afternoons, I fixed a crooked cabinet or read a book Miriam had loved and scolded myself for not reading when she was there to argue about it. Nights, I fell asleep to the sound of lake water licking pilings and the soft creak of a house that didn't need a single person to love it to stand, but had one anyway. Sometimes in the evenings, Lila came by with a pie from the diner, or we met at the park. She started counseling. She took a job at the elementary school, answering phones and bandaging skin knees. She learned to say no with a voice that didn't tremble. She paid off a small credit card all by herself and showed me the zero balance like a blue ribbon from the fair. Trust returned in inches, not miles, but inches add up if you let them. Brent called once from a number with a Wyoming area code. I didn't pick up. He texted a photo of a slot machine and the words, "Can you help a guy out?" I forwarded it to Naomi with a smiley that did not belong in a police record and blocked that number too. I heard through Tom that Brent had been fired from 2 dealerships out there. Through Naomi, that his creditors had finally begun to talk to each other and had found he was paying no one. Through Mrs. Pettigrew, of course, that he'd come back once at 3 a.m. and hammered on the Sycamore door until the cops came. He spent a night in county for violating the order. Some lessons are paying rent for rooms you never wanted to see. One evening, long after the last cement had cured at the Veterans Place and the maple had turned its ordained yellow, Lila and I stood at the end of the dock on my lake. The sun was doing its best last show. "Do you ever miss the old house?" she asked. "Every day," I said. "But I don't miss the version of us who lived there." "I think about the way I spoke to you," she murmured. "Like you were a servant." I wake up sometimes and hear my voice saying it. "You said it because you thought love was a faucet you could turn and never worry about the bill," I said. "You said it because I taught you that, by paying every time without asking whether the heat was on too high. You're not mad." I was. Then I was sad. Now I'm busy. I pointed at the far bank where someone had put in a bench. Busy with coffee and birds and learning how to make French toast without burning it. Busy making room for the kind of man I like being. She took my arm. The air tasted like pine and a little like metal, the way it does right before a storm or a story. "Dad? Thank you for leaving." I laughed. "I know." And I did. Leaving wasn't punishment. It was instruction. It taught me that love with no boundaries becomes a sponge that soaks up every spill until it starts to smell. It taught my daughter that respect is not a chore you do to stay housed. It's the habit that makes a house worth staying in. It taught a man like Brent that some doors lock from the inside and stay locked. On the morning the first snow dusted the ridge over Silverbrook, I woke early, made coffee, and took Miriam's photo off the dresser. I sat with it and said, "Because the dead deserve details, you would like how this turned out." Lila is growing into herself. The house is full of children who know how to say please and thank you without being prompted. The veterans built a raised bed in the side yard. They'll plant beans in spring. I replaced your sticky kitchen drawer at the cabin. It took me 2 tries, and I said words you'd laugh at. I am not lonely. I am not angry. I am finally kind to myself. Out on the lake, the ice was starting along the edges, glass first, then porcelain. I cracked the cabin door and let the cold in because sometimes you want the world to remind you it's real. My phone buzzed. A message from Lila. "Coffee Saturday? I want to show you something. It's small, but I think you'll be proud." Always, I typed back. I meant it. Even when what you're proud of is a small, steady thing, measured not in dollars, but in decisions. On the way to town, I drove by Sycamore. In the big front window, someone had hung paper snowflakes all crooked, the way children do. On the porch, 3 pairs of boots lined up by size. The maple held its bare fingers against the pale sky like a choir raising hands. I slowed to wave at Staff Sergeant Santos's daughter, who was shoveling a tiny stripe of sidewalk with an iron-willed intensity one recognized from a wife who'd once insisted we repaint the kitchen at midnight because the color is wrong in this light. The girl waved back with her whole arm. At the diner, the waitress had my coffee poured before I Saturday. "You look good," she said. Less burdened. I finally learned to pack light, I told her. Right down to my heart. Lila came in 5 minutes later, cheeks pink from the air, scarf trailing, holding a folded sheet of paper like it was fragile. "I made a budget," she said, sliding into the booth. "A real one. I'll never win any awards for math, but I think I can do this." I put on my reading glasses and looked. Rent on a small apartment. Groceries. A line for savings that was modest and, therefore, miraculous. Counseling. A jar for generosity labeled Dad's Lesson. In the corner she'd written, in that tidy hand I'd seen on thank you cards and permission slips, "No more ultimatums." I signed my name at the bottom even though no signature was required, then folded the paper and put it in my coat pocket like a keepsake from a time you realized your life had already turned and you were just now catching up to the turn. When I left the diner, the sky had opened into the kind of blue that seems like a promise. I walked to my car and drove home past the river, watching chunks of ice spin themselves into patterns and then break apart again, the way families do and don't. I pulled into the cabin's little drive, cut the engine, and sat for a minute, breathing. Then I went inside and made myself lunch, hummed a song Miriam used to mangle on purpose, and, for no reason at all, opened the door to the deck and let the winter into every room.